Hi, I'm Mike Settele. I've been an SAT tutor since 2006. I have run SAT classes and courses. I've taught students one-on-one for the SAT. I've written SAT study guides, and I've built a very popular YouTube channel dedicated to SAT prep. On that channel, I have a 10-step SAT study plan that students all over the world are using to prepare for various SAT test dates. Now I have adapted that study plan for our 8-class SAT course. And in this video, I'll go over what each of those classes is going to cover so that you have an overall sense of the curriculum. The classes themselves will be taught by me, and students will have an opportunity to interact with me. Most of the class, I'll be giving them questions on the particular topics that we're covering. They'll be able to answer them and ask questions about them. And if they have questions about any of the homework that they've done, they'll be able to ask that as well. So let's get right into it. What is class number 1 going to cover? The overall big picture strategies for the SAT. These things are unavoidable. If you want to change your SAT score, you have to change your SAT strategies. So we're going to start with that approach so that students know that this is not just like every other test that they've taken in school. In reading, we're going to cover the dumb summaries strategy, which is all about simplifying the passages. We'll talk about the outlines, the vocab, and yes, those long passage questions. In math, we'll talk about the plug points into equations strategy, which is pretty self-explanatory, but students forget to use it. There are also certain aspects of it that are a little harder to use. The arithmetize strategy, getting used to guessing and checking again, and we will definitely talk about the strategies for the built-in Desmos calculator. So class 1 is all about big picture strategies. In class 2, we're going to go over the essential memorization. These are the topics that are basically unavoidable. They're going to come up on every single SAT multiple times on each test. So this is where we do have a little bit more of the traditional kind of studying that students are used to. They're going to study grammar, they're going to study the transition words, and for math, they're going to look at lines and quadratics. These are big parts of the test, so this will feel very traditional, but of course, we're going to adapt those strategies we did in class 1 to these kinds of questions for class 2. Now in class 3, we're going to review the strategies because I really want the students to be using them, but this is all geared towards making sure they are taking their first SAT practice test the right way. So I will give them questions, but there's also going to be a lot of me talking, making sure that they understand how to take these tests in the best possible environment, because it's really important that those practice tests are done right. So we'll review the strategies, we'll talk about the pacing strategy for each section, we'll talk about how to use bookmarks to make sure they understand their confidence level as they're answering questions, and they will be able to figure out how to review tests. All of the testing itself will be done on their own. I'm not proctoring tests. They will do this at a time that best suits their schedule in a nice quiet environment. They'll be able to take the test in the Blue Book app that the College Board provides, and they can review it using my explanation video. So this is very important for setting the tone. We will take more practice tests, but we want to make sure the first one is done right. Then after they've reviewed that test, class 4 is going to be titled If X, Then Y. This is very traditional as well. Basically, there are certain kinds of trigger words and trigger ideas on the SAT that they need to get good at recognizing, and then there's some sort of response that they're going to need for those topics when they see them. So for reading, there are certain strong words that as soon as they pop up in a passage or a question, we've got to pay attention to them because they usually indicate some sort of trap answer. We'll also look at the vocab questions. There are certain ways the SAT twists up the relationships in those sentences, so we'll make sure the students know what words to look out for and to untwist those hard questions. In math, we'll look at some pretty traditional topics, number of solutions for lines and quadratic situations, and then percentages, which is a big trap-heavy topic on the SAT. In class 5, we're going to branch out and start talking about some things that are not as tested as often, but are still just as important for achieving a high score. The connector placement grammar rules, some hard vocab questions, but a lot of this lesson is going to be on the geometry and statistics topics. There's a lot of memorization and strategies that go into those. Even though they don't make up a lot of the test, we want to make sure we cover that. And we're going to set up for our second practice test. And this is where students are probably going to start to see score improvement. The first test is kind of just for practice and for getting experience with the SAT. This is where we'd want to see score improvement a little over halfway through the course. Now on class 6, there's probably still going to be some things to clean up. The first thing we want to make sure we do is master the middle. These are kind of those easy, medium questions that still kind of slow students down, even if they get them right. We want to make sure they're getting them right confidently and quickly. So we'll look at some difficult passages, the transitions questions, the outlines, places where students get slowed down when they really shouldn't. And in math, we'll talk about some key strategy situations where the strategies actually make us more efficient, and we'll keep working on untwisting some of those really hard topics, things that are hard at first glance, but then with practice, you can get good at getting back to some sort of foundational math. Class 7 is going to be hard. We're going to talk about sacrifices. So for students achieving top scores, we're definitely going to look at the crazy hard reading passages, the crazy hard math questions, basically the hardest stuff that we could see on the test. And we're going to give them experience with that, so hopefully they can get it right. But for many people, this class is also a reality check. You do not have enough time to answer all the questions correctly and confidently. So we have to have a plan for sacrificing questions. So even if you're not scoring super high, this is an important class for understanding which questions are not great targets. And we will set up for our third and final practice test. In our last class, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to revisit old topics, refresh on some key ideas. So for reading and math, we're going to basically overview those big strategies and make sure our last week before the SAT is very calm and stress-free, and we're studying in the right way. We'll also talk about those test day logistics to make sure kids are getting enough sleep the night before their exam. Now, in terms of homework, there will be homework in between the classes. I'm not going to check the homework, so this is kind of an honor system thing, but I do believe that students who complete the homework will have a better experience in the class. For the most part, I will be giving them lessons and exercises to complete before the class. So for example, with something like grammar rules, I do not have enough time to teach thoroughly every single grammar rule. So it'll be up to the students to kind of learn that a little bit beforehand. That way too, since everyone learns at their own pace, they can go at a pace that suits them. But if there are certain topics that they're struggling with, it is okay for them not to complete every single thing that I suggest beforehand. Basically, the class is going to straddle the week's lessons. So they'll be able to do some stuff beforehand, so they're coming in with some knowledge. But if there's things that they need to clean up after, that would be okay too. And like I said earlier, the practice tests in the Blue Book app are not going to be done in a proctored way. We're not going to use class time for that. They will do that on their own and review the tests on their own so that they're targeting their specific weaknesses. I hope that this gave you a good sense of what our course entails. Once again, I am Mike Settele. I will be the teacher of that course, and I'm very much looking forward to meeting the students.